And what we're going to do is now we're going to dive into what is our task for today, and that is we're going to be speaking more about the Devi Bhagavata Purana. As people know, we've been going through, I believe it's approximately 21 verses, a passage, a sequence of verses from the Devi Bhagavata Purana, speaking about the great goddess and various goddesses. And as we've seen, not to repeat, but for those who haven't been here for a little while, I need to tell people, as we have seen, the Devi Bhagavata Purana is not a quote-unquote Shakta Purana. There are no Shakta Puranas. They don't exist. There are no Shaiva Puranas. There are, in fact, for that matter, as a Vaishnava, there are no Vaishnava Puranas or Upanishads or anything else. The Vedic scriptures are a whole, and they speak with one voice. They do not contradict each other. God forbid if they did. If that which is the loftiest of epistemological mechanisms by which we have the ability to penetrate into the transcendent, if that itself contradicted each other, we'd be in trouble, because then we would have no recourse of knowing truth. Those with a more philosophical and sincere mind bent understand what I mean by what I just said. There can be no contradiction. If there's contradiction within the Vedic scriptures, if the Vedic scriptures are just man-made, just literature like any other literature, then we're lost. Because then there is no transparent via medium. There is no way by which we, as faulty, finite beings, have the ability to peer into that infinite depth of the transcendent reality. So this being the case, this is why true gurus, true acharyas, true bhaktas, true followers of Sanatana Dharma understand that the Vedic scriptures are one. They are one, they are one, and they speak with one voice, and that voice is the voice of God. If you do not understand that, and let me just speak to who I know is in my audience, the good people in my audience. If you do not understand what I just said and accept it, you are not a Hindu. Don't call yourself that. You are not a follower of the Vedic tradition. You are not a follower of Sanatana Dharma. The Vedic scriptures are the voice of God in our world. This being the case, as we have gone through the Devi Bhagavata Purana, we have seen that it has the same message, different emphasis. Otherwise it would be one book, the Vedic scripture. But instead there's the Vedic scriptures, many, many books, all of which have their own emphasis. So this has a different emphasis, but it is the same conclusion, the Devi Bhagavata Purana, as the Srimad Bhagavatam, as the Vishnu Purana, as the Shiva Purana, as Brahma Vaivarta Purana, and on and on and on. They speak with one voice. So what we're going to be speaking about today is indeed Saraswati. We're now at these passages, at these verses, where now Saraswati, her nature, is explained very, very nicely. Now, I began saying this the last time that we were together, toward the end of my talk, in preparation for now. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper and speak about this a little bit more. And that is several things that I need to say, first of all, about Saraswati. And these things are necessary in order to relieve people from the stereotypes about this goddess. You see, people have seen, who have followed my work for, well, I've been teaching for over 35 years now, 37 years. People who have followed my work have seen that it seems like, maybe a fourth of what I say is to dispel caricatures and wrong ideas about every aspect of Sanatana Dharma. That's true for the gods, the goddesses, this is true philosophically, this is true about the history, this is true about the literature, etc., etc., etc. Well, now we're going to talk about Saraswati a little bit. Several things to say about her. First of all, as I was saying, again, the last time we were together, in order to fully and truly understand any divine being, in fact, for that matter, let's start with the universal and then get specific. In order to understand any being, that means even a human being, That means even someone you love. That means your best friend. That means your husband, your wife. That means your child. That means your parents, etc. In order to understand a being, there are two ways in which we can understand them. This is something that's understood universally in all philosophy, both Vedic as well as the history of Western philosophy as well. That is, you can understand their secondary attributes. That is, you can understand what you see on the surface. And we all know this. Even if you have some being who you love, you can understand this in this one way, that is surface level. What are their secondary attributes? Oh, again, like I did last time, just to use this as an example. Oh, here is my wife, who I love very much. She is a certain height. She is a certain weight. She has a certain features of her face. She has a certain way of speaking, of laughing, etc., etc., etc. Oh, and I like all these things about her. Now, these secondary attributes are of importance, without which we would have a difficult time even identifying this is my wife versus someone else. So the secondary attributes are of importance. However, for the vast majority of human beings, we identify with others only in accordance with those secondary attributes. And why? Because A, those secondary attributes are easy to discern. You can look at your wife and literally see her form, and you can discern, all right, that's my wife. But the other reason why is because it's through the secondary attributes that we can relate to the person. In other words, there's a little bit of self-involvement that is there. Oh, my wife has a pretty face that pleases me, you see? And on like this. So when we look at the secondary attributes of any being, it tends to be in self-relation. We tend to think about ourselves, and this is how we, as separate beings from that being, we have the ability to then relate. But it's still centered upon me, upon self, upon, really in a way, to a greater or lesser extent, what does this being, what can this being do for me? Those are the secondary attributes. Now, there's another way in which we can relate to other beings, and that is in their primary essence. That is, in their essential being, in their essential nature. That is, not just how I relate to them and they relate to me, not just the immediate features that I see about them, but in truly that which is invisible, that is what is the very essence that makes them a unique being. You see? It is in the secondary way, really it's the primary way, but that's right. It's in the secondary way that we're speaking of that we truly can now come to know that person. Let's not speak of being anymore. Now we're speaking of person, of personality. That we can now relate to them, not merely in the sense of, oh, how do I relate to them? What do I like about them? What does their presence give me? But no, now we have the ability to appreciate them for who and what they are. In other words, on their own terms. Now, some people, of course, do have the ability to do this. Most do not. And again, it's due to our conditioning. It's due to the fact of who and what we are in the material world, our perceptual awareness, etc., etc. Many factors come into play. But spiritually speaking, it is incumbent upon us to relate to divine personalities, especially in this secondary way, i.e. in accordance with their essential nature. Not just what we see, but who they are. Now, with this understanding, again, this is how we are to relate to anyone who is alive. We are to relate in this way again with our husband, with our wife, etc., etc., etc. But now let us shift things and talk about divine beings. Now when we speak about divine beings, and what do I mean by divine beings? All divine beings. That means, ontologically speaking, from the very highest, i.e. God, but then also other gods, goddesses, etc., who are lower, who are Shaktis, etc. We are to relate to them in the same way. We are to relate to them in the same way. Let's jump to the highest. Let's speak about God. Let's speak about God. Let's speak about that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Let's talk about that which is the supreme absolute truth. We, of course, likewise have our choice. We can relate to God in accordance with God's secondary attributes, or we can relate to God in accordance with truly what I call, of course, divine ontology, i.e., what God is in and of himself. That is the very essential nature of God. We have that choice. Individuals who, of course, relate primarily to the secondary features, the secondary attributes of God, i.e., that which is most noticeable, that which is most obvious, that which we, in our illusion state, feel that we can relate to, i.e., what can God do for me? Even in the subtlest of ways, you see? It's not that all people who relate to God in accordance with God's secondary attributes are all necessarily narcissists or anything like this. No. But even in subtle ways, most people, when they think of God, they're still thinking, oh, yes, God. Oh, God, I love you. Oh, but I need help with this and I need help with that. And, we tend to think, again, what God can do for us. And in that way, we think of God's secondary attributes, God's strength, God's power, God's mercy, etc., all of which are good. But are they the highest way in which we can relate to God? They're not. This is why, indeed, within Sanatana Dharma, I hope people are listening very, very carefully to this. If you have been attending these talks for 25 years, or if this is your first time at this channel, please listen very carefully. This is the very essence of Sanatana Dharma. This is the very essence of the path upon which we traverse. And that is this. This is why the highest of all spiritual activities, the highest sadhana, the highest thing that we can do, that we can perform, is prapatti. That is, surrender of self unto God. Why? Because when we do that, we are acknowledging and offering our reverence and obeisances to all of God's secondary features, but we also are going beyond that, and we are surrendering our existence to the very essential nature of who God is as a person, in and of himself. And we are doing this with zero sense of self, with zero sense of, I'm going to surrender to God, and I hope that helps me. Even spiritually, what to speak of materially. The person who surrenders to God, the true devotee, and this is amazing, does not even say, yes, I hope surrendering to God like this, it will give me liberation. No. The individual who performs prapatti, who surrenders at the feet of God, has this mindset: God, I understand who you are. I understand your personality. And I surrender my existence unto you. And if and only if it is your desire that for some reason I should have liberation, I accept it because it's your will. If it is your will, on the other hand, that I not ever be liberated, I accept that too. So that's the difference. So indeed, when we are to know, this is the summary, if we are to know another being, we are to know the essential nature of that being in the deepest sense. Now, why am I saying all this? Yes, it's profound. Yes, it's true. It's certainly true. This is certainly the essence of Sanatana Dharma. But why am I saying all this? Now we are to understand this. When we approach any of the devas or devis of Sanatana Dharma, what to speak of taking the atheistic route of, it's all mythology. Oh, how nice, it's all mythology. Nice stories to teach us a little lesson. That's for the animalistic atheists. Even as a spiritual person, as a truly spiritual person who, no, that's not their attitude. Let's say you are an actual spiritual person. If we approach the gods and goddesses with the stereotypical caricatured idea that, Oh, this is the god of X, so I want X, let me appeal to this god. This is the goddess of Y. Oh, I want Y, therefore let me appeal to this goddess, etc., etc. That's more spiritual than the atheist, oh, it's all mythology, and oh, maybe it has some lesson to teach us. That's for the animals. We're talking now about actual humans who are followers of Sanatana Dharma. Even that approach, that is, oh, yes, yes, I accept that you're real, please give me X thing. That is approaching the gods and goddesses in accordance with their secondary attributes. If we are to truly understand these beings, whether Lakshmi, whether Surya, whether any god or goddess within the pantheon of Sanatana Dharma, the Jungian archetypal nonsense of atheistic modernity has to be thrown into the garbage can where it belongs. They're not archetypes. They're not inner New Age energies. We're not to access our inner god, inner goddess. That's New Age garbage. 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 Rather, we are to approach these beings as real, as personalities distinct from who we are. Now, let me focus on that for a moment. Why? You see, people who may, right now, their minds are all jumbled up, trying to disagree with me on this. You understand that this is how you approach human relations, right? You have enough respect that if you're speaking to another human being, you don't treat them as an archetype, as something there to serve you and give you a lesson. You understand? You treat them as a separate being from yourself with their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own concerns, their own desires, their own being. You understand that, right? If you don't, well, that's very sad. That means you're a narcissist. We understand this about other human beings. When you approach a child, when you approach a stranger, you treat them with respect and you see them as beings of their own accord. They're not extensions of you. You see, to see every being as an extension of you, you're a narcissist, probably a sociopath. No. We understand that if you respect a being, you respect that being for who that being is. And this doesn't apply to the gods and goddesses? Of course it does. So we approach them as personalities who we are to respect. They're not aspects of our own inner psyche and blah, 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 etc. All this Jungian, again, nonsense. No, we respect them as personalities. This being the case, now understanding this with all the devas and devis, that this is how we are to approach them, now finally let's speak of Saraswati. Finally, Saraswati, we have to have the exact same approach. Is Saraswati the goddess of, and there are many things indeed, we're going to talk about many of these things here. Is she the goddess of intelligence? Is she the goddess of wisdom? Is she the goddess of the arts, of music? Is she the goddess of beauty? Is she the goddess of civilization? An aspect that I always talk about, but people tend to forget. She represents quite literally Sattvic civilization, Vedic civilization. Is she all of these things? Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Is her only role in existence to sit on her swan, to sit on a lotus, to sit on a throne, to sit wherever she finds herself? And as we pray to her that we do very well in our high school exams, our college exams, is it her job to just kind of sit there and say, oh, yes, yes, you'll get an A. Yes, yes, you'll get... No. Should we do this? Yes. You see, this is the nuance. Should we appeal to Saraswati to please illumine our minds with intelligence? Please illumine our minds with wisdom. Please illumine me in such a way that I may be a wonderful music performer, beautiful artist, etc., etc. Yes, we should appeal to her. But to see that as her sole role in existence is kind of like seeing our mother as, oh, she's the person who feeds me. See the difference? Is she the person who feeds you? Is your mother the person who feeds you? Oh, yes. Is that all she is? If that's all that she is for you, that's very sad for you, that that's how you see her. Or is she someone who you respect on her own terms as a person? Yes. In the same way, this is how we see all the gods and goddesses, now with Saraswati very specifically. Indeed, this is the role that she has secondarily, but we need to understand who she is in and of her essence. Now, who is Saraswati? Several things to be said before we jump even into this, actually, because indeed, I've written a book called The Shakti Principle. There is a large chapter, the book is right here. There is a large chapter in this book about her nature, all about Saraswati. And there are several things to be said about her. She is found throughout the totality of the Vedic scriptures, quite literally, from Rig Veda all the way through the Puranas and many other scriptures in between. Her nature is the same. She also, as a goddess, did not quote-unquote evolve. If you go to Wikipedia and foolish atheistic sources like this, they will tell you all the gods and goddesses of Sanatana Dharma evolved, and this one merged with that one, and over time this happened, and the understanding disappeared and then came back. And no. She is described in the exact same way throughout all the Vedic scriptures. She is many things. First and foremost, originally, she is one of the Shaktis of Narayana, of Vishnu, very specifically. And indeed, this is an aspect historically, now speaking somewhat academically, historically about Saraswati that very few people know, even people who are quite religious followers of Sanatana Dharma. And that is that at one time, if you went back far enough in history, meaning at the very least, 12th century, 11th century, something like this, very often you would see depictions that now only exist in museums and a few private art collections, of which I've seen a few of these in people's private art collections who have invited me. You'll see depictions of Vishnu and then Lakshmi and Saraswati. They are considered to be the Shaktis of Vishnu. For that matter, also Ganga, for that matter, also Bhudevi are considered to be the Shaktis. For that matter, there are infinite Shaktis, not all of whom are actually depicted. But this is a motif that you saw up until roughly the 12th, maybe stretching into the 13th century, where you have Vishnu, Lakshmi, Saraswati. And again, this has disappeared in modern times. Modern times meaning the last, roughly 700, 800 years. That's what I mean by modern times. So at one time it was understood Saraswati was indeed one of the Shaktis, specifically of Vishnu. Now I know what people are going to say, but wait a minute, is she not the consort of Brahma, the creator god? Yes and no. Yes and no. She was handed over to Brahma to be one of his Shaktis, one of his helpers, not interestingly a formal consort, because Saraswati is an eternal virgin. That's another thing people don't know about her. When they hear consort, of course, they think, how they think of themselves with so-called consorts as human beings. No, Saraswati is an eternal virgin. So from the beginning of the creation of this universe, or toward the beginning, she has then been paired up with Brahma. That was because that had to be the case. He needed her Shakti, he needed her power in order to not just make the universe, but make the universe into a sattvic realm. Does this make sense so far? So this is why you indeed see the story in the Puranas again and again. You see it in Devi Bhagavata Purana in a different section. I've read it myself in multiple Puranas where it is confirmed that Saraswati was initially one of the Shaktis, a consort, quote unquote, of Vishnu, and then Vishnu eventually gives her to Brahma in order to assist him in his creation of the universe. Now, it's interesting. With everything I said, again, watch, this, for that matter, watch all of the videos half a dozen more times, but this one especially. You'll see that, again, I pick my words very, 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 very specifically. I mentioned how Brahma, by the power of Narayana, had the ability to create a universe. But he needed also to be paired with Saraswati to make it into a sattvic universe. That is, a universe the invisible foundations of which was of the nature of good. So what is it that Saraswati contributes to Brahma in order to create this universe. And then, interestingly, this is going very deeply, by her own power, now really as an original consort of Vishnu, to also help to uphold the sattvic nature, invisible sattvic nature of this universe. Well, what are some of her qualities? They include all the things that we mentioned. That is, she is the goddess, she or her expansions, because she also has many expansions. Bharati, Vagdevi, Gayatri Devi, she has many different expansions. What she contributes are those things that make the universe meaningful and beautiful and give it actual order rather than chaos. So what are some of her, indeed, secondary attributes? Well, they include actually intelligence. Dhi is intelligence. They include, indeed, wisdom, true wisdom. They include knowledge of every sort. Factual knowledge, but also eternal knowledge, actual wisdom. They include the power of speech. These are some of the powers of Saraswati. So Vach, that's why one of her expansions is Vagdevi, the goddess of speech. They include Gayatri. Gayatri is one of the, again, expansions of Saraswati. Why is Gayatri so important? Gayatri is of such importance because starting with that initial Brahma Gayatri mantra and then expanding into all of the other Gayatris, the recitation of Gayatri helps to uphold the order of the tripartite universe in and of itself. She is the goddess of that. She is the power of that. And more, Vedic civilization itself. You see, one could look at the vast expanse of just this universe. There are multiple universes. One could look at the vast expanse of just this one universe alone, and what will you see? You'll see everything. You'll see anything. You'll see everything from the grandest civilizations to barbaric tribes who are cannibals, etc. You'll see technologically advanced evil and demonic civilizations that are godless. Imagine the Stalinist Soviet Union, but having won and taken over this planet and eradicated good, and just having some technological, atheistic, barbaric hell. There are places like that, etc., etc. You'll find everything, in other words, in this universe. But what truly constitutes reality are those nodes of civilization throughout the universe with the gods, sometimes on this planet, always invisibly on this planet, and other places as well, that represent the very height of civilization. And those nodes of actual reality represent the true nature and purpose of our universe itself. That is, it represents the gods themselves, present throughout. And more, it represents the will of God manifest concretely as Dharma and instantiated as civilizations. Shambhala being only one of them, invisibly speaking, but then visibly speaking, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Vedic civilizations that we have seen in the past, and more, the hundreds and hundreds of Vedic civilizations that we are going to see established in our world, on our planet, on Bhudevi, in the future. And the future, again, meaning in our lifetime. When you look at all these nodes of true civilization throughout our universe, it is Saraswati who is the foundation of them all, because she represents true and Vedic civilization. So indeed, this is who Saraswati is. And more, let me go just a little deeper, as if I have not enough. Let me go a little bit deeper, because I talk about this very extensively, and again, the Shakti principle. What else is Saraswati? Well, again, I'm not going to go into all the citations from scriptures for you now, because again, they're in the book, and honestly I can't remember them all because there are so many of them. But again and again and again, when speaking about the essential nature of Saraswati, again, you remember that we were talking about secondary attributes of a being versus their essential nature. What is the actual essential nature of Saraswati herself? She is, now we talked for several weeks about Lakshmi Devi and her essential nature as the Shakti in comparison to the Shaktiman. Well, Saraswati also has a similar ontological status to Lakshmi Devi, i.e., when we see Saraswati Devi, we're not looking merely at a goddess. This is not an Atman who just happened to have very good fortune, was reincarnated as a goddess. For that matter, we're not even looking merely at something much higher than that, even a celestial goddess, that is a being who represents some truly important power within this world. But rather, the actual ontological nature of Saraswati, this is something that even a lot of latter day, meaning again, the last several hundred years, Vaishnavas don't even know this. If you look at the literature, it makes it clear. The actual ontological nature of Saraswati is that she is, in her very essence, a transcendental being. She is one of the consorts of Narayana. Understanding that alone, if you are a Vaishnava, you should understand what that means. She is similar to the nature of Lakshmi Devi. So indeed, when we look at Saraswati, we're not looking at just, a goddess, as if that itself is not an exalted thing. I say this in a way where it sounds like, it's, just a small thing. To be a goddess is not a small thing, but she's not even just that. Rather, her nature is that she is absolutely transcendent to the material world, to this material realm. That is her actual nature. Acharya? Good? All right, very nice. So this is the introduction to what we're going to look at. This is the introduction, and this is in my mind, extemporaneous. I did no research for this beforehand or anything. This is my extemporaneous, very brief introduction, actually. I know that philosophically I've thrown a lot at people, so I would like to see if there are any questions that people have. There's one right here. Please speak loudly so people can hear you.
Could you say that Lakshmi is the main Shakti of Vishnu, or more of a Shakti, or?
Yes, main Shakti of Vishnu. Yeah. Equality does not exist anywhere within reality, spiritual or material. Let me say that again. Because, this is the number one brainwashing concept of modernity. Equality, 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 equality. Equality does not exist anywhere within any reality, either material or spiritual. Even the liberated beings, even the divine beings of Vaikuntha, they don't form committees. They don't form collectives. Rather, they're all seen. How did I preface my entire preface? By talking about how we are all persons, and we're all different, we're all distinct. Well, this is true even for the Shaktis. Again, any foolish person who will look at all the various Shaktis of Narayana and say, yes, they're all equal, that's a person whose brain has been warped and perverted and poisoned by modernity. Nothing is equal. Nothing, no one. No one person is equal to another. All that being said, yes, Lakshmi Devi is Shriman, the primary Shakti of Narayana. And indeed, if just very quickly, if we were to try to catalog all of the Shaktis of Narayana, we would not be able to. So they're the ones that everyone obviously knows, so all right, there's Lakshmi Devi. I guess there's Saraswati Devi. Now people have this revelation. And there's this and that and so many different Shaktis. They're the ones that we know, but then there are the ones that we are not capable of knowing. Because we cannot conceive conceptually or experientially in our present state what is the nature of many of these specific powers. It would be kind of like going to a person who was born blind, and you can have as much verbal description as you want of what it's like to see. They'll never understand it. In the same way, there are powers, there are Shaktis of God that are inconceivable to us. So there are many, but of them, Lakshmi Devi, Mahalakshmi, Shriman is the highest. But you had a follow-up?
Yes, I was also wondering, so, so Lakshmi, gives her energy, and then, I guess Vishnu has Shaktiman and he does more action generally, but then you could also say Lakshmi does action too, right? And Lakshmi gets energy from Vishnu, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
But there's a difference, right? Like it's because
There's a give and take, but there's a difference. Yeah, there's a give and take, but there's a difference. Between mother and father, there's a give and take, but you can't say the mother is the father is the mother. Well, of course, today politically people want to pretend, which, is very quickly dying. I told people 30 years ago that this nonsense was a fad. But yeah, there's certainly give and take. There's certainly slightly going back and forth between mother and father. Often the father will serve the so-called motherly role and vice versa. These things do happen, but at the same time, for anyone who's intelligent, you understand that's my father, that's my mother. If you can't distinguish that, well, then there's something very wrong. In the same way, yes, the same with Sriman and Narayana. They both have their essential roles, but of course, saying that Lakshmi is the Shakti doesn't mean that she isn't also active. She's not just the power of activity. She herself also uses activity itself, and vice versa. Even though Narayana is not the Shakti, can he empower, which is to bestow a Shakti? Of course. So you have a little bit of give and take, but at the same time, you understand, mother, father. Sometimes the father does things the mother should do, and vice versa, but you still understand the difference. Same thing with Sriman Narayana. Does that make sense?
yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yes, please. Nice and loud.
So, you said that Saraswati is I can't remember if you said she was the foundation or the origin of the Gayatri mantra, of Gayatri. But then later you said that she was she transcends the celestial. So, because when you said that, it was a little bit surprising because she appears to be more of a water element, but then there are other things when she kind of is, I guess, can you comment a little bit more on that and how, if she's not celestial in any way, is she not a solar deity? Or?
I didn't say she was not celestial in any way.
Okay.
No, she transcends the celestial. That doesn't mean she cannot affect the celestial.
Okay.
God transcends all reality, all material reality. There's nothing material in God, but can God come as avatar and affect the material reality? Of course. Yeah. But no, you want me to comment on that a little bit more?
If
Absolutely.
you could, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, as far as Gayatri, Saraswati herself, in her original form, is not the personification of Gayatri. It's one of her expansions known as Gayatri Devi. So it's interesting. Again, this is something that in the future professors will have to write papers upon, dissertations. This distinction between a being's secondary attributes and who they are in and of themselves. So, let me explain the process. You have Saraswati as the transcendent being, who also becomes manifest in the material world. This is true for Lakshmi as well. We spoke about that. Well, you remember last time we spoke about, the royal Lakshmi of the palaces, Lakshmi of the gods, Lakshmi of the household, but the actual Lakshmi transcends all things. Same thing with Saraswati. It works in the same sort of way. So there's this telescoping effect from the transcendent down to the material, literally into people's homes, literally to that one very sweet 12-year-old child who wants to do well on his test, and he says a very sincere prayer to Saraswati. I never want people to make the mistake of thinking that I said, there's something wrong with that. No. We should pray to Saraswati for such things. The only point being, let that not be our only relationship with her. Now, all that being said, Saraswati herself has the ability, as is true for all of these transcendent beings, to expand themselves into secondary personages, what are called angshas in the Sanskrit, angsha. That is a portion, a plenary portion very specifically. So with Saraswati, there are many different aspects of her in that sense. There's Bharati, there's Vagdevi. One of these is Gayatri Devi. Now, the reason why I reminded people of this dual distinction of secondary attributes versus essential nature is because when we think of Gayatri, you see, it's interesting. People who know Vedic things, they know that word. 99.9% of the time, when they say Gayatri, they're thinking of the mantra. When I say Gayatri, unless it is within a specific context where, yes, it's specifically about the mantra, when I say Gayatri, I'm thinking of the goddess, Gayatri Devi. And this truthfully is how we are to think of her. That is, again, the essential being, the essential nature of the person. There is a person known as Gayatri Devi, and she herself is the very essence of the mantra. That makes sense now? You see how the understanding that the International Sanatana Dharma Society, the understanding that we are giving the entire world, including the Vedic / Hindu / Sanatana Dharmic world, is not only unlike anything that most people have heard, but it is the essence of Sanatana Dharma. It is the truth of Sanatana Dharma, as has been lost for a long time. So, indeed, when we think of, and there are really hundreds of other examples we can give, but you asked about Gayatri. When we think of Gayatri, we think of the person first. Let me give some other examples, just for fun. In fact, let me just give one that's very close to home. Surya. When people say Surya, and this is true historically as well, not just today. This has been true, sadly, for a few hundred years. When people say Surya, they think of literally the sun. And what about the sun? The attributes. They think of the power, the brightness, the purifying effects of the sun. For a Vedic person, you claim to be, again, I'm going to look at the audience, you claim to be Hindu. When you hear Surya, don't just think of the power of the sun. Think of the person who is so exalted to the point where he's not just a god, he is a celestial being. This is inconceivable to most people, what it even means to be a celestial being. When you hear Surya, think of the person, who is a person not just as real as you, more real than you. I always have to make that clear. It's amazing, this spectrum, Oh, yes, the gods, they're not real. They're just aspects of me. Oh, no, they're just as real as me. No, they're more real. What to speak of being less real? Oh, they're just mythology. Forget about, oh, they're less real than me. They don't really exist. Again, that's the atheist. That's the atheist. That's the atheist. More, it's not just that they're as real as you. They're more real. Now, what do I mean by that? I've said that before, and that may confuse people. What I mean is both ontologically, but also in the fact that they are manifesting their Atman much more perfectly than any typical human being can ever hope to. When you think of a celestial being, again, like a Surya, they are manifesting their Atman most perfectly. In that sense, they are more real than you. Why? Because illusion is not really a thing for them. To state it colloquially, illusion is not really a thing for them. They're more real than you. The gods and goddesses are more real than you. They're not less real. They're not made up. They have more being than you do. There's more meaning to them than you have. So this is why when we think of such beings, we are to think of their essential nature. What does that mean in plain English? Who they are in and of themselves as a personality. We are to have that respect. Not just, oh, what can you do for me? Not that relationship, but rather a relationship in which you're acknowledging the person as a person. You know, even Western philosophers, there have been several modern Western theologians and philosophers in the 20th century who have made this distinction of seeing another as a thing versus a person. Most humans see other humans as things, as objects to serve their interest. A tiny, 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 tiny minority of humans have the ability to see another person and realize it is a person. This is just with humans. What to speak of the gods? We are to see them as persons. We claim we respect the gods, and yet we see them as less than things? No. And then we wonder why, with all these so-called spiritual activities that so many people have engaged in the last 50, 60 years, pagan this and a little Vedic that and yoga this and New Age this, why the world has only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And it has. Since the 60s, the 60s killed us. Things have gotten worse, not better. And why? Because even in so-called spiritual activities that people do, they're insulting the gods because they see the gods as tools rather than independent persons who we are to respect. Every time you have a New Age flake, some woman who appears on YouTube and, oh, awaken the goddess within you, she's insulted the goddess. Awaken the goddess within. She has now made the world worse, spiritually, because she has now insulted the goddess. Why? Because for her, the goddess is an it, not an independent being who we are to respect. She has made the world worse spiritually. And we've seen this. We've seen this. We've seen this. So indeed, if we are to have a true spiritual awakening in this world, such that it will usher in truly the golden age that is upon us, then we are to embrace the authentic. We are to reject all of modernity, including looking at religion and spirituality through the warped lens of modernity. We are to reject it all, and we are to embrace the real. This is what the International Sanatana Dharma Society represents. This is why we have a movement unlike any other movement upon the face of this earth. This is why we are doing what others have not even dreamed about, because they don't know about it. See, they think the whole, awaken the inner goddess within you. For so many people, that's the height of spirituality. For us, that's practically demonic. We understand what is Sanatana Dharma like no one else does. So thus we reject Neo-Hinduism, thus we reject the New Age, thus we reject left-hand path, little baby cretins. We reject all of modernity. And what do we embrace? We embrace Sanatana Dharma, and more, we practice Sanatana Dharma the way it was practiced in Dvapara Yuga 5,200 years ago. And we compromise with no one. This is the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Welcome.